Morning, sir.
Yes, during our last session, we were discussing about the contribution of various committees related to the changes made in the structure of corporate governance in India that we had discussed. Today, we will be discussing the guidelines of two companies. If possible, we will try to cover the both companies, that how they are implementing corporate governance in their organization. So we will be discussing the structure of corporate governance of Infosys and structure of corporate governance at Wipro. Both are renowned companies. So because of the changes or because of the recommendations of various committees which we had discussed, because of that, it is compulsory for all the organization to have their rules and regulation related to corporate governance clearly mentioned, and it should be circulated to the employees of the organization. It should be there on the website of the organization so that anyone can go through with that particular rules and regulations of corporate governance. So that now we will be discussing. We will start with Infosys. We all know that Infosys, a very renowned company, which is one of the largest companies in India, which deals with IT related services. So, what their structure of corporate governance is, that we are going to discuss now. I'll share the screen just a moment. Can you see the screen?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, this document I have downloaded directly from the website of Infosys, which was effective with date July 15, 2020. Because of the COVID-19 pandemic, not many changes have been made in these rules and regulations. So important points under these rules and regulations that we are going to discuss. So in this corporate governance guidelines, they have mentioned minutely how they are going to implement the guidelines of corporate governance in the company. Purpose and framework, I'll not be discussing. Board structure. Now here board structure is, now in purpose they have written the main objective of finalizing these guidelines of corporate governance. Why they thought that it should be published on the company website, that is mentioned in the purpose. Now board size. The size of the board shall be as per the memorandum and article of association of the company. So whatever rules have been mentioned in the memorandum of association and article of association under Companies Act 2013, according to that, the structure or the membership of the board will be. So according to Companies Act, the maximum strength of the board of directors of a company can be 20 Bs. It cannot be more than 20. That is a rule mentioned in the Act 2000, Companies Act 2013. Now, again, there is one option given that this maximum number of 20 board of directors can be increased if permission is taken from the government. If the company wants to increase the number of directors, then the company is supposed to take the permission from the government, and if the government is ready, then two more members can be added to the board of directors. Otherwise, the maximum number which a company can appoint on the board of directors is 20. Now, next important structure under constitution of board, they have mentioned board diversity. Board diversity means that the company will be including the directors on the board from various categories. They will be male, they can be female, they can be from various religions, they can be from different parts of the country, they can be from different parts of the world also. Now, this board diversity, the company is trying to implement because the company wants that fresh ideas, innovative ideas should come in the board meeting. If the person is talented and the person is from some other country, that person can also be included in the board because it wants only talented people on the board. So, male, female, religion wise, everyone is welcome. Only thing required is the person should be having talent, the person should be having expert knowledge in the field of IT. Then it will be a mix of executive, non executive, and independent directors. Now, the board which board of directors at Infosys, the board of the company shall have an optimum combination of executive, non-executive, and independent directors with at least one woman independent director. Now, independent director, we have already discussed that a person who is not involved directly or indirectly with the affairs of the company. That person, if appointed a director in the board, then that person can be called as independent director. Now, independent directors are appointed on the board only on the basis of their expertise, only on the basis of their knowledge in that particular field. A person who is having experience, who is having thorough knowledge in IT field of say 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, that person can be invited to be part of the board by Infosys. And that person who doesn't have any role to play in the day-to-day affairs directly or indirectly of Infosys, that person will be called as, if appointed, that person will be called as independent director. So they have mentioned very clearly that in the board, they will always make sure that one independent director, female, is there in the board. Just now, we have discussed diversity of board. This is promotion of diversity of board. That not only males but females are also given preference while appointing the independent directors on the board of directors. So at least one female director will be there. Not less than 50% board shall comprise of non-executive directors. Non-executive directors means the directors who are not directly involved in the affairs of the company, who are not the general manager of the company, CEO of the company, chief executive of the company. Such people or such directors should consist of 50% or more than 50% of the board members should be non-executive directors. Now, why all these things are included? Because the company wants to have transparency in its affair. It is assumed by the company that if more executive directors are representing the board, then there are chances that there can be manipulation in some of the decisions. Why? Because these people are responsible for the day-to-day affairs of the company. General manager, CEO, managing director, or the senior managers, if more such people are included on the board of directors of Infosys, then there will be more chances that as they have taken the decision, they have implemented the decision, and if the decision is not giving the desired results, there may be chance that to save their position, they may manipulate with figures or manipulate with some sort of information also. Now, to curtail this, to stop this, to avoid this, it is mentioned in the guidelines of the company itself that more than 50%. And if more than 50% are non-executive who are not directly involved with the company affairs, then there are more chances that even if such proposal is brought to the board by the executive directors, as more members are non-executive, they can very easily cancel such type of decisions. They can very easily overrule such type of decision. Why? Because majority is non-executive director. So that was one of the prime reason why this particular clause is included by the company. Now, next one, lead independent director. Now, when we will be discussing the types of director, there we will be discussing that how many directors should be there in the board of directors and the meaning of lead director in detail. Now, here, lead director is a director who is representing other independent directors. Now, suppose if five independent directors are there, among that five, one will be designated as lead independent director who will be leading other four independent directors. तो अगर पांच इंडिपेंडेंट डायरेक्टर है तो पांच में से एक को लीड इंडिपेंडेंट डायरेक्टर बनाया जाता है और जो लीड इंडिपेंडेंट डायरेक्टर है दैट पर्सन विल बी लीडिंग द अदर four independent directors. Now, the lead independent director serves as a liaison between non-executive directors and the management and performs such additional duties as the board may determine. So, he is lead independent director is a link between the non-executive directors, the executive directors, and the other independent directors. So, he is a person who will try to play a positive role in the functioning of the board of directors. If a decision seems to be against the say majority of the stakeholders, then it is the duty of lead independent director that he should bring it to the notice of other board members that if we implement this decision can go against the interest of most of the stakeholders, which will not be good in the interest of the company in the long run. So, this way, he plays the most important role. As well as here, the company has given him authority that as he is representing the other independent directors and he is liaising with the other non-executive directors, he is given the power that he can approve or disapprove decisions of the board also. Now, this thing is given just to promote transparency in all the dealings by the organization. Independent director is not indirectly involved with the affairs of the company. Only because of his knowledge, he is there on the board. Now, because of that knowledge, it is expected that he will be taking correct decision and that decisions will be transparent. That decision will be in the interest of most of the stakeholders, all the stakeholders of the organization. Next one, annual director elections. Now here, the tenure is mentioned of the directors and how they can be elected and whether a director who has served one term can be nominated as director again that they have mentioned. So 1/3 of the board members shall be subject to retirement by rotation. Such board members who are willing to get reappointed shall be elected annually by the company shareholders. Each year, at the company's annual general meeting, the board shall recommend the names of the directors eligible for re-election by the shareholders. The independent directors shall not be subject to retire by rotation as they are appointed for a specific term. Now, here they have mentioned very clearly that the reappointment of the director, suppose the director is appointed for a term of 2 years or 3 years. After 3 years, automatically the director retires from the board. Now, if the director is to be reappointed on the board is not having the authority for reappointment of that director. But here, shareholders can reappoint the director. 3 साल एक डायरेक्टर था, 3 साल के बाद वो रिटायर हो गया. अब उसे अगर वापस अपॉइंट होना है तो शेयर होल्डर्स ही उसे अपॉइंट कर सकते हैं, बोर्ड उसे अपॉइंट नहीं कर सकती. फॉर इंडिपेंडेंट डायरेक्टर्स द रूल इज डिफरेंट बिकॉज दे आर nominated for a specific term. 5 years if they are nominated. After 5 years, again, they can be nominated not by the shareholders but by the board. Now, the next one, the board qualification and the term. They have mentioned the board qualification and the term in detail. I'll share you this entire document. We will be just discussing the important points only. We will not be reading all the document. Yes, now board inductions, screening and selection of new directors. That if new directors are to be appointed, what is the rule for appointment of the new directors? That we are going to discuss now. It is again very important that how a person can be appointed as director in the company's board of directors. The board delegates the screening and selection process involved in selecting the new director to the nomination and remuneration committee with direct input from the chair of the board. The nomination and remuneration committee is responsible for formulating the criteria for determination, qualification, positive attributes, and independence of a director and recommending candidates to the board when circumstances warrant the appointment of a new director. While performing his role, the nomination and remuneration committee shall place due consideration for qualification, integrity, expertise, and experience of the candidate so nominated. So it is mentioned very clearly that a committee is set up by the board of directors. That committee is responsible for the selection of a new director and how much remuneration will be paid to that director. That committee is responsible. That committee works under the direction of the chairman of the board of directors. Now, to make the things clear and transparent, it is mentioned very clearly that the experience, the expertise, positive attitude, positive attributes, then qualification, everything is finalized, and on the basis of that only the directors are appointed, particularly the independent directors. If the qualification says that the candidate should have an experience of at least 20 years of working in multinational companies related to IT fields, then only the candidates who are having more than 20%, 20 years of experience, and that too in multinational companies dealing with IT affairs, only those people can be included. It is mentioned very clearly that under no circumstances it will be changed. That the board chairman knows a person who is a friend of his or a relative of his, but who is having just 10 years of experience. As he is his close relative, the person is given the appointment of act as director on the board. So this is prohibited. This cannot happen. Why? Because separate committee is responsible for the selection, and the entire selection committee report is to be placed before the board of directors of the company. Suppose four independent directors or non-executive directors are appointed. Why they are appointed, their qualification details, their experience details, what they have contributed in their field, or what they have contributed in the previous organization where they were working. Every detail is checked and it is placed before the board of directors for discussion. If it is noticed by the board of directors that some qualifications, some points were compromised for selection, that selection can be cancelled by the board of directors. So it is very clear that the qualifications, the expertise, the contribution of the person, if they are fixed, they cannot be compromised, they cannot be changed. Only according to those things, person can be appointed as director on the board of directors of the company. Now, next one is very important. New director orientation and continuing education. Orientation. Now, if a director is coming as an independent director, he has not worked in Infosys, he is not directly or indirectly involved with the affairs of the Infosys. Only on the basis of his expertise, his knowledge, the person is included as director on the board of directors. Now, under this, the person or the newly joined director, before he directly starts doing his job, first he should be given a orientation. Orientation in the sense, it can be a 2-day orientation, 3-day orientation, 7-day orientation. It depends upon the policy of the company. Now, why this orientation is given to a person who is expert in this field? And only because of that expertise, he is included as director on the board. Is it necessary that orientation should be given to this expert also? So, yes, it is to be given. Now, orientation will not be given in his expert field, his expertise. If he is an IT expert, he will not be given a training program to improve his IT skills. Only because of that, he is there on the board. Now, here, orientation will be given to this newly appointed director about the culture of Infosys, working structure of Infosys, working environment of Infosys, the rules and regulations of Infosys. So, this type, as he is not aware of all these things, he is only aware of his field, he is expert in that. So, how Infosys work, what is Infosys culture, what is Infosys working environment, what are the various rules and regulations of the company, all this should be known to this newly appointed director. So for that, the person is given a orientation training. That is for orientation. Next, very important thing which they have included in the corporate governance guideline is continuing education. Continuing education. The continuing education means that if some new concept has developed, they have included, say, 4 independent directors on the board of directors. But as technology is progressing very fast, the company noticed that new technology has come, which the present directors also are not aware of, or they are not very familiar with that particular technique or technology. Now, here, the company has made it very clear that it will be supporting continuing education program. It is not that independent director was appointed at the board because of his expert knowledge in the field for last 25 years or 30 years or more than that. He knows everything in the field. But if new technology is coming and this gentleman wants to learn the technology, then they have made it very clear in the guideline that the company will be sponsoring the candidate for knowing that particular technology, for studying that particular technology. So that is continuing education, not only of the employee, continuing education of directors we are talking about. Highest position in any organization. हर किसी का सपना रहता है कि कंपनी के बोर्ड में इंक्लूड होना. अगर आप कंपनी की बोर्ड में आ गए तो यू हैव अचीव्ड एवरीथिंग. दिस इज द नॉर्मल थॉट कि कंपनी की बोर्ड मतलब हाईएस्ट अथॉरिटी, हाईएस्ट बॉडी. अब क्या जरूरत है मुझे और सीखने की? यहां पर 3 साल निकालूंगा, वापस सिलेक्ट हुआ तो वापस करूंगा, नहीं तो फिर रिटायरमेंट. यहाँ दैट इज द नॉर्मल थिंग. बट here in Infosys they are promoting continuing education, that if a director who is having experience of more than 30 years, if he wants to learn a new technology, then he should not pay for that learning. Company should be paying for that learning. That is very important. So we can very easily here find out how much they are trusting their employees and how much they are investing in their employees. If they are ready to invest in board of directors, definitely they will be interested or ready to invest in their employees too. So that was related to new director orientation and continuing education. Role and responsibility of the board. Again, every role and responsibility is mentioned very clearly uh, in the orientation. Earlier point, we had seen the orientation program. In the orientation program, not only the working culture, working style, or rule and regulation of the company are shared with the new director, but their role and responsibility is also updated. Ki this you are appointed as independent director. This is your role. You need to play this role. You will be part of this particular committee. You have to attend 3, 4, 5, 6 meetings of the board, which will be conducted at this period. So all the procedures are shared with the newly joined directors. So that is what mentioned in the role and responsibilities of the board. Corporate governance philosophy. Corporate governance philosophy, again, it is very simple. I'll read. I'll read from the third line. Our that is Infosys is saying. Our corporate governance is the reflection of our value system encompassing our culture, policy, relationship with our stakeholders, integrity, and transparency are key to our corporate governance practices to ensure that we gain and retain the trust of our stakeholders at all times. Very important line. This is the philosophy of Infosys. In three lines, they have given their entire philosophy, that how much they care for their employees and for their stakeholders, all the stakeholders. They have mentioned it very clear. So integrity, transparency plays a very important role with Infosys. Professional conduct. So code of conduct is given not only to all the employees of the organization, but code of conduct is given for the board of directors also. That what is the code of conduct for board of directors? It is not that if a director is appointed on the board, he will be working at his will or at his wish, कि जब दिल हुआ तब अटेंड किया मीटिंग, जब दिल हुआ तब नहीं किया, ऐसा नहीं है. यहाँ पर कोड ऑफ कंडक्ट है कि आपको कितनी मीटिंग अटेंड करनी पड़ेगी. अगर आप किसी कारणवश मीटिंग अटेंड नहीं कर सकते हैं, तो कैसे आपको इन्फॉर्म करना है, मीटिंग में कितनी देर पहले आपको पहुंचना है. Every rule and regulation related to the board of directors is included, is given very clear. Conflict of interest. If there are disputes, if there are conflicts, how these conflicts are to be resolved. Again, it is mentioned very clearly. annual strategic and operating plans. The board is responsible for preparing the annual strategic plans as well as the implementation of these plans. So again, they have mentioned very clearly how the plan is to be prepared and how the plan is to be implemented. Very clear. Now, meeting attendance. Here we are talking about the attendance of all the board members, that it is compulsory on the part of all the board members, including the chairman of the board, to be present on all the meetings of the board of directors. They have mentioned very clearly that if a person, if a director or chairman of board of director is unable to make it to the meeting because of a genuine problem, then how that person should communicate, that is again mentioned very clear. It is also mentioned that suppose if all the members are present but chairman of the board is not present, then meeting should not be cancelled. The next senior most person or the lead independent director can take over the position of the chairman of board for that time being, and he can or she can conduct the meeting of the board of directors. Now, governance control, not only the uh, controls means the measures to be followed to promote transparency in the day-to-day affairs of the company and how they are monitored or controlled by the board that is mentioned here. Some of the points we will be discussing, very simple points but very important points. The responsibility of the board shall include, because board is supervising, board is monitoring, board is controlling whether all the corporate governance guidelines which are mentioned on the website of the company are implemented as it is or not. That is the responsibility of the board. Number one, supervise the effectiveness of companies' governance practices and making changes as needed. So they have to supervise, and if they feel, the board feel that some changes are to be made, those changes can be made by the can be done by the board. Next one, approval of establishment of board committee, their mandate, composition, and working procedure. Various committees again we will be discussing in detail uh, before in this guidelines only. We have discussed one committee related to the appointment and remuneration of the directors. So like that, audit committee is also there, then CSR committee is there. So various committees are there. So board of director has to constitute these committees as per the guidelines given by the government, and they have to check whether all the committees are functioning according to their laid down rules and regulations or not. Next one, selection, evaluation, and retention of chairman, chief executive officer, and oversight of selection and performance of other key managerial personnel. Now, two very important things. One, we are talking about retention, that people should be retained, and immediately we are also talking about performance, that who are to be retained, only those who are performing. So indirectly, a very clear message is included in the guidelines that it is not that CEO's performance will not be evaluated as he is the head of the organization. To retain CEO, to retain the MD, to retain the general manager, their performance will always or will definitely be evaluated by the board of directors. And only on the basis of their performance, they should be retained. अगर सीईओ परफॉर्म कर रहा है, अगर मैनेजिंग डायरेक्टर है, अगर वो परफॉर्म कर रहा है, या कंपनी में सिर्फ जनरल मैनेजर है, तो जनरल मैनेजर परफॉर्म कर रहा है या नहीं कर रहा है, उसका परफॉर्मेंस इवैल्यूएशन बोर्ड करेगा, and the person will be retained only on the basis of his performance. If that person is not performing, that person will not be retained, even if he is working at the top of the organization. जनरल मैनेजर सबसे बड़ा जो उसका डेजिग्नेशन है ऑर्गेनाइजेशन, it is to be the performance is to be evaluated. Next one, understanding and reviewing of implementation of strategic plans that we have already discussed. Selection and oversight of independent auditor. This is very important. Selection and oversight of independent auditors. Monitoring integrity of financial information and legal compliances. Very important. Here, what is happening is, what is expected is that how they are to be selected, and once a independent auditor are selected or is selected, then whether that person or people are working properly or not. ऐसा नहीं है कि इंडिपेंडेंट ऑडिटर को अपॉइंट कर दिया, जो भी वो ऑडिटर बोलेगा वो सब सही है. ऑडिटर का भी ऑडिट, जो भी ऑडिट है उसका भी यहां पर चेक होगा और उसके बाद रिलीज होगा. Independent auditor, of course, he has been or she has been given too much of powers and too much of authority, but whether that person is using that power in the interest of the company or in his personal interest, it is to be checked by the board of directors. Next one, review and approval of significant corporate actions, declaration of dividend, major mergers, acquisition, transaction, etc. Again, very important thing the board has to decide is that it has to review and approve significant corporate decisions related to that, how much, if the company has made profit, how much dividend will be shared with the shareholders. That is to be decided by the board of directors कि कितना डिविडेंड होगा, शेयर कितना दिया जाएगा, 1:1 शेयर दिया जाएगा या फिर और कुछ दिया जाएगा, या फिर कितना इंसेंटिव्स दिया जाएगा शेयर होल्डर्स को. दैट इज टू बी डिसाइडेड बाय द board of directors. If the company is planning for merger, if the company is planning for acquisition, these all decisions are to be taken by the board of directors. Next one, evaluating, nominating director members of our board committees that we have discussed. Approval of the charter guideline policy as per the statutory requirement and board governance. Now, board charter we will be discussing separately. There we will be discussing board charter is rules and regulations of the board. How the board is going to function. That rules are to be again checked by the board, finalized by the board. If any changes are required, then changes can be implemented. Then selecting very important. Selecting, compensating, second last point. Selecting, compensating, monitoring, and when necessary, replacing key managerial personnel and overseeing succession planning. Very, very, very important. What they have mentioned is selecting, compensating, monitoring. सिलेक्ट करने की जवाबदारी बोर्ड ऑफ डायरेक्टर्स की है. की पर्सनल मतलब मैनेजिंग डायरेक्टर अगर अपॉइंट करना है, सीनियर मैनेजर अगर अपॉइंट करना है, जनरल मैनेजर अगर अपॉइंट करना है, तो ये जो की पोजीशंस है, these positions are to be selected, are to be finalized by the board of directors. So selecting, compensating, how much salary is to be given, how much benefits, how much incentives, how much perks, how much perquisites to be given to these uh, senior managers or CEOs of the organization or general manager of the organization. It is to be decided by the board. Monitoring their performance. Once a person is selected as general manager, whether the person is performing his duties appropriately or not, it is to be monitored by the board. And when necessary, replacing. Very important. ऐसा नहीं है कि सीईओ को अपॉइंट कर दिया है 3 साल के लिए या 5 साल के लिए, अब 5 साल तक इसको रिप्लेस ही नहीं किया जा सकता, वो काम करे ना करे. उसका जो उसके कार्यकाल में अगर लॉस हो रहा है कंपनी को, तो उसे 5 साल से पहले भी रिप्लेस किया जा सकता है. दैट इज मेंशन्ड है वेरी क्लियरली, दैट सिलेक्टिंग, कॉम्पेंसेटिंग, मॉनिटरिंग एंड व्हेन नेसेसरी, जब भी जरूरत होगी. 1 साल में ही अगर पता चल गया कि बंदा काम नहीं कर रहा है, 1 साल में ही उस बंदे को निकाला जा सकता है. यहाँ पर नहीं बोला जा सकता कि उसका अपॉइंटमेंट 5 साल के लिए था तो वो 5 साल तक रहना ही चाहिए. राइट. देन the governance during catastrophe and crisis. जैसे अगर कोई इमरजेंसी आ जाती है तो बोर्ड कैसे फंक्शन करेगी, दैट इज ऑल्सो मेंशन. दैट अगर अचानक से, जैसे अभी now this for the last more than 2 years we are fighting with pandemic, that is COVID-19, which has completely ruined our lives. It has changed the entire structure, not only of the industry but the other sectors also, be it education sector or the service sector or the IT sector, industry sector, whatever. So everything, everyone has gone through a drastic change because of this pandemic. So if such emergency comes in, if such negative situation or such because of say any other emergency, how the company will be performing, that is mentioned here. Succession planning, you all are aware of what is succession planning, that how the highest position, if all of a sudden the highest position, that is the CEO of the organization, if he resigns or because of some medical emergency he cannot continue as a CEO, then how that person is to be replaced at the earliest. It is the responsibility of the board of directors. Then there are board committees. So just the board at all times shall have the following committees. Number one is audit committee. Number two is nomination and remuneration committee, stakeholders relationship committee, risk management committee, and corporate social responsibility committee. So these committees are to be constituted by the board of directors, and these committees will be reporting to the board of directors. Their role and responsibility that we will be studying separately, discussing separately. So these committees are there. Then independence and qualification of committee members. Now, the composition of committees shall be as the respective terms of reference drawn in compliance with the Act, listing regulation, listing condition of NYSE, and the time being in force to the extent applicable to the company. Further, the committee membership criteria shall also be subject to overall across all public limited companies prescribed under the listing regulations. Now, here you would have noticed as the company is a multinational company, it is not only working in India, but it is also working in other countries. So it is mentioned very clearly. NYSE is what? New York Stock Exchange. So they will be following the rules and regulations not only of India, but they will be following the rules and regulation of the other country also. Presently, they have mentioned as the company is listed in NYSE, New York Stock Exchange, they will be following the guidelines of the US also. Next one. Now here they have given the links also that if we click on the link, the charter of audit committee, we will be able to read the charter. Charter is nothing but the rules and regulation and role and responsibility of audit committee, then nomination and remuneration committee, ki how many members should be there, how these members are to be appointed, what is the role of these members, what are the responsibility of these members, how these members have to prepare their report, to whom they can send their reports, how much authority has been given to the committee. So every detail is given on the web link. So you can go through with that. Committee report, committee evaluation. Now board meetings, schedule and place. Again, very simple. That how many board here very clearly. How the meeting should take place, how the agenda should be prepared, and how the agenda should be circulated. Everything in detail they have mentioned very clearly to avoid any confusion. So this is in general or in all related. Then they have included the miscellaneous also, that how the rules can be amended or changed. So all these things they have, that is Infosys, have made it in writing. They have put that or posted that on their website only because they want to promote transparency in their dealings, in their day-to-day affairs. If everything is known to the employees, to all the stakeholders, then there are less chances that there will be manipulations taking place. So that is related to the corporate governance guidelines of Infosys. I'll be sharing you the corporate governance guidelines of Wipro also. So maybe tomorrow, by tomorrow, just check under the notes of corporate governance on our website. You will find the notes of chapter 1 as well as these guidelines of corporate governance of Wipro and guidelines of corporate governance of Infosys. Download that and start preparing for that. So thank you everyone for joining today's session. In the next session, we will be discussing the constitution of board and function and responsibility of the board. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.